Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, as always, Matthew Quinn. I want to thank you guys all for tuning in to the show tonight. We are, of course, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. We've got a great show for you today. It is Draft Eve, everybody, so we are getting very, very close to the NFL Draft now. You can almost taste it. And a lot of teams now are just kind of making the final preparations of everything that's going into the NFL draft. So we're going to talk a lot about that leading up to the NFL draft tomorrow night. And also, I just want to just give you guys a quick reminder. If you did not watch the show last night and you didn't catch my announcement last night, I will myself and host of the Down by Sports or Down by Contact Sports show on the GSMC Sports Network as well. Jeremy Lapidus, he will be joining me, and we will be doing a live draft, a live watch along of the draft tomorrow night, starting at 7:30. So definitely come in and hang out with us, and we're going to be talking all things NFL draft, going through all of the picks, making our predictions as to, who we think is going to go next and things like that. So definitely keep an eye out for that. That's going to be a really fun show. We're going to be there for the entire draft, so it's going to be a long show. So definitely tune into that at some point if you get a chance to, because that'll be fun to get through. Also, just want to let you guys know just what's going to happen on this show tonight. We are going to be talking about our first couple segments are just going to be top players that are going to be going in the NFL draft and where they might go, whether that be first round, second round, or, whatever the case. We're going to be starting with quarterbacks in the first segment, and then we'll be branching out to running backs and defensive tackles. And make sure you stick around for later in the show, and we're going to be talking a little college football to end the show, and I'm going to be giving you my takes on the season outlooks for both the Nebraska Cornhuskers and the SMU Mustangs. So that should be an interesting couple segments there, so definitely stick around for that. But before we start, I just want to ask that you guys like and follow the show. If you got a question during the show, we definitely want to hear it as always. If you want to go ahead and contribute to the show in that way, you can definitely hit up the super chat button, and your input is always a big part of this show, and we thrive on your energy and your insights. And whether it's a quick comment that you just want to make, or a thoughtful question that you might have, or just maybe it's just an opinion that you want to share, don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. Now, if you want to make absolutely sure that your message stands out and gets featured on this show, there's an easy way to do that. Like I said before, just use the super chat feature. Just click the $sign at the bottom of the chat box to send in your super chat. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a great way to support the channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you all of that sports content that you love, and we appreciate all of the support that you guys give us. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit that super chat button. Let's keep this show fun and exciting. And if you prefer, you can always go to the website as well, gsmcsports.net, to tip, donate, and leave a comment or a question there. Couldn't do what we do without you guys and your amazing support, and we're thankful to have you as part of our community. So once again, that website, if you want to go there, is gsmcsports.net. If you want to tip, donate, or just leave a question or a comment right there. So let's go ahead and get into the meat of the show here. We're going to be talking very, very draft heavy on this show. And of course, tomorrow's show is the big show, with the NFL draft. But I wanted to start this show by just talking about quarterbacks, obviously the most popular and polarizing position in all of football. Some might say in all of sports, really, but definitely in the NFL. So we're going to be talking about quarterbacks. The top 5 quarterbacks that are listed, this is just my top 5 ranking. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to jive with everybody else's, but this is just my own personal opinion of these 5 quarterbacks that I'm going to have listed here and where they might end up. And the first one is pretty obvious. We talked a little bit about this last night when we were talking our mock draft and things like that. But top 5 quarterback, number 1 on the list, of course, is Cam Ward. He is the highest prospect of the entire quarterback class as far as most talented quarterback. So he's going to be going to the Titans. I think pretty much everyone knows that at this point. It's going to be a real shocker if he doesn't go to the Titans. It's just been highly publicized, and he's probably going to end up in Tennessee. The Titans are in need of a quarterback, and Will Levis has not really worked out. So bringing in Cam Ward with the number 1 overall pick should hopefully, in their cases, in their minds, maybe put them on the right track to getting back to competing in the AFC like they did back when Mike Vrabel was the coach and Derrick Henry was toting the rock too. So The Titans going with Cam Ward. That's who I have there. So number 2 is a guy that's been talked about a lot through this, really over the past couple of days, but really throughout the whole process of the draft, but especially in these last few days. But that's Shedeur Sanders, and I have him going to the Saints, and I have him going number 9 overall because that is where they pick in the first round. I don't think Shedeur Sanders falls past that point. I know there was talk that he could potentially fall to 21 where the Steelers are picking. I don't think he falls that far. I think the Saints grab him at number 9. I know the Saints are also very enamored with Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss as well. So that could be an option for the Saints, but I typically like Shedeur Sanders there. I think he fits what they're trying to do there. And with the questions surrounding Derek Carr and his injury, that kind of opens up the hole possibly there at quarterback, because they don't know how much they can count or if they can count on Derek Carr going forward even past this year. So they need to start thinking about what they're going to do at that position. So I like Shedeur Sanders to go to the Saints, and Kellen Moore, the new head coach there coming over from Philadelphia, being the offensive coordinator there where they won the Super Bowl. And he was the last head coach to get hired in this whole hiring cycle. There was a lot of talk that many teams or many coaches didn't necessarily want to go to the Saints because it wasn't a great situation. They were in cap hell. They didn't have a lot of money to play with. They didn't have a lot of talent on their roster. They've got a couple of young guys. Chris Olave is a decent wide receiver, but Derek Carr is probably like kind of middle of the pack as far as quarterback, maybe a little bit below that, depending on what year you're talking about, because there were a couple of years there with the Raiders where he actually looked pretty good before he ended up getting hurt. And that's really the big issue with Derek Carr at this particular point of his career, is he has dealt with a lot of injuries in recent years. So the Saints could be a little bit wary of that, because that's the whole reason that there's questions, is he's hurt again. He's got a shoulder injury that he may need to have surgery on. So that's just another thing in the list of injuries that Derek Carr has had. So the Saints need to start thinking about what they're going to do and what their plans are, because Spencer Rattler, the guy they drafted last year, he's not their future. He's not a franchise quarterback. He's a second or third string guy at best. So they're not going to have a future with him. So they're going to want to address that position in some way. So I have the Saints going Shedeur Sanders. Number 3, I have Jackson Dart, and I have him going to the Browns, but I don't have him going to the Browns in the first round with that 3rd overall pick. I have Jackson Dart falling to the 2nd round, and I think that is where the Browns will take him. I know the Browns have signed a couple of guys in free agency and via trade at the quarterback position, being Joe Flacco and then, of course, Kenny Pickett. They still do have Deshaun Watson technically on the roster, although he will not play this year because of his multiple injuries to that same Achilles that he had. Had the Achilles injury at the end of last year and then went ahead and injured that same Achilles again in the offseason. So that's 2 torn Achilles on the same Achilles. So you got to think he's not playing, maybe not playing another down for the Browns in the rest of his career, I would imagine. I think that's kind of the sense that you're getting around Cleveland right now, even with the owners, Jimmy Haslam, coming out and saying that it wasn't necessarily the best choice to go ahead and get Deshaun Watson in the first place. It was a swing and a miss, as how he put it. So they're possibly going to take another swing here with Jackson Dart, but it'll be a lot less of a risk than the Deshaun Watson deal. And I think Jackson Dart is he's not a first round talent in my opinion, but I think he could fall to the later rounds. He could even fall past the Browns. This is not a sure thing that he is going to, be drafted by the Browns, of course. It's just I think that he will go in the later rounds. I don't think he's going to go first round. And the Browns make a lot of sense, because if they're going to get a guy like Travis Hunter with the 3rd overall pick, they're going to want somebody to throw the ball to him. And I know they do have Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett, but neither one of those guys are your future. So they need to start thinking about that. And having Jackson Dart in the mix there, I think would be a good move to kind of try and push Kenny Pickett. And as we have seen in the past, he's not necessarily great with competition, so he may fizzle out if you draft Jackson Dart, that's a possibility as well, because it happened in Pittsburgh, so it could happen in Cleveland as well. And in Philadelphia, he was never going to get a start there, not with Jalen Hurts there. So this gives him a better chance to be a starter in Cleveland, but I still don't think that he will be. I think it's going to be Joe Flacco week 1, and then whoever it is that they pick up in the offseason or through the draft, whether it be Jackson Dart, whether it be somebody else, will eventually see some playing time throughout the course of this coming season. So moving on to the next guy in this list, I have Jalen Milroe, and I have him going to the Steelers, but I have him going to the Steelers again in the later rounds. The Steelers don't have a second-round pick, so this would mean that they would either draft or trade up into the second round possibly or even trade back to get into the second round. That's been a conversation as well. But I think the Steelers take Jalen Milroe in the third round. That's where I think he goes. The thing with Jalen Milroe, he's got all of the physical tools that you want in a quarterback, but his accuracy leaves a lot to be desired. He really does need to work on that. He is the definition of a project quarterback. Now, if he hits his ceiling, he could be one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He has that kind of potential, but that's the thing. It's like, will he reach that potential? That's a whole other conversation. He has the tools. So if he can get the right guidance, he could end up being a very, very good quarterback in this league. And the Steelers wouldn't have to risk too much by getting him. If he can fall to the later rounds and they can get him there, wouldn't have a problem with that. So moving on to the last pick in this segment here, I have the Giants at number 5 going Tyler Shough. And that is, of course, I'm not saying he's going first round, of course. These are all guys after Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. These are all guys that are going in later rounds, in my opinion. Tyler Shough is another one from Louisville. He is the elder statesman of the quarterbacks coming out of the draft this year. He is up there in age, played a lot of football in college at Louisville. So he is going, in my opinion, to the Giants. I think the Giants take him in the later rounds, possibly a third round, maybe fourth round pick if he falls that far. The Giants obviously went ahead and signed Russell Wilson in the offseason, as well as Jameis Winston, and they've got Tommy DeVito as the third string guy right now. But you got to think that they're going to try and upgrade that position at some point, whether that be this year or next year, because Russell Wilson is not going to be your starter, for the future, and neither is Jameis Winston. So, and I don't think there's a future with Tommy DeVito either. So I think the Giants, most likely, go quarterback next year to go and get their franchise guy. Tyler Shough is just a guy that I think can come in and they can work on and maybe see if he has enough potential to possibly move forward, and maybe be the starter next year if they can develop him a little bit. And that will kind of change the tide as to what they do in the draft next year. But that's where I see him going overall. So those are my 5 quarterbacks: Cam Ward to the Titans, Shedeur Sanders to the Saints, Jackson Dart to the Browns in the second round, Jalen Milroe to the Steelers in the third or fourth round, and then Tyler Shough to the Giants again on day 2 or 3, in my opinion. So that is the quarterback. So when we come back, we're going to talk running backs. A much, much deeper class than the quarterback position is the running back position, as well as defensive tackle, who we are also going to talk about in the later segment. But stick around. We're going to be right back right after this break, and we're going to get right into the running backs. So stick with us. We'll be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world
All right, guys, welcome back to the show. We're going to dive on into our second segment of the show, and we're going to be talking about running backs. But before we do that, I do want to just give you guys a quick reminder that if you have a question or a comment or anything that you want to add to the show, definitely go ahead and hit up the super chat box. Go to GSMCsports.net as well if you want to tip, donate, or leave a question or a comment there. Otherwise, hit up the super chat button and list your question or your comment there, and then we'll get to it as soon as I see it. So that is, once again, the GSMCsports.net if you want to tip, donate, or leave a question or a comment, and then the super chat here on YouTube. So let's go ahead and get into the next part of our show here. We're going to be talking about running backs, a very, very hot class right here. There's a lot of really, really talented running backs that can go. And again, these are my top 5 running backs. I could very easily make the argument that a lot of other guys belong on this list as well. But for the most part, this is what I think in terms of quality of running backs. Number 1, not really any surprise to anybody, Ashton Jeanty is the top running back in this class. I have him going to the Las Vegas Raiders. I know there has been talk in recent days that the Giants, Patriots, and possibly even the Browns, one of those teams could be moving around in the draft, in the top half of the draft, possibly to get Ashton Jeanty. I know the Patriots have been linked to him a little bit there, and the Browns and Giants have both recently been in talks about possibly moving down in the draft. So we'll see what happens with that. But I have Ashton Jeanty going to the Raiders. I just think it's a better fit. The Raiders are in desperate need of a franchise game-changing type of running back, as they have severely lacked in that regard since losing Josh Jacobs to the Packers. So they need to upgrade that position in the worst way, with Alexander Mattison being their main running back last year and him only getting about 400 yards rushing while also leading the team in rushing. You definitely need some improvement at that position, especially with last year being such of a renaissance in running backs, with Saquon Barkley having a tremendous year, and then Derrick Henry also having a great year, and then Josh Jacobs also having a great year in Green Bay. So there was a lot of very, very good running backs last year that really made a case for why running back is still a very important position on the football field. And I don't think that has really changed, at least in my mind. I think as your offense goes, the way they say, the quarterback goes, or the team goes as far as the quarterback will take them. But you can kind of make that argument with the running back as well, because the running backs do a tremendous job helping those quarterbacks by, taking some pressure off of them, being able to eat up chunks of yardage and keep drives going, wearing down defenses and things like that. Running backs are very, very valuable, and I think last year proved that with the emergence of Saquon in Philly and then Derrick Henry in Baltimore, most notably, as those two running backs were, back and forth as to who was the best running back in the league throughout the course of the year. And then it ultimately ended up being Saquon Barkley, who had all of the records and all the accolades and was just absolutely tremendous for the Philadelphia Eagles last year. So the Raiders are hoping that they get the same type of production out of Ashton Jeanty if they were to go ahead and draft him here. And I think he can absolutely bring that to the Raiders. Ashton Jeanty was tremendous in college with Boise State. So he needs to be able to translate that into the NFL, of course, which is, a lot easier said than done. But he has the talent to be able to do it. He's been impressive every step of the way in this whole offseason program here. So I think the Raiders will be very, very happy to take Ashton Jeanty. Now, if he goes earlier than that, then I think maybe the Raiders go offensive line or something like that. I think that kind of slightly changes their draft outlook, at least in the first round. But Ashton Jeanty to the Raiders is what I have. Now, the number 2 running back is Omarion Hampton, in my opinion. Now, as far as where he goes, I've kind of flip-flopped on this a few times over the course of this whole process. There were times that I had him going somewhere else. There were times I had him going to the Cowboys, which is where I have him going right here. It's where I think he's ultimately going to land in Dallas, because Dallas is another team that does need running backs. They did go ahead and get Javonte Williams from Denver in the offseason, but I don't think that he is a franchise running back. He kind of had sort of a mediocre year last year for Denver. He wasn't really what they wanted him to be, is part of the reason why they were willing to let him go. So I think Amarian Hampton would be a big upgrade over what they currently have, because last year all they had was Rico Dowdle, and then of course they brought Ezekiel Elliott back towards the end of the year, but that was kind of, a wash. He didn't really do much. He didn't get a ton of playing time and was released before the season ended. So not much going on in the Cowboys running back room now. So I think Amarian Hampton will inject some life into that group. And if you remember a few years ago when when Dak Prescott first came into the league and the Cowboys were, having great regular seasons, and then, of course, we all, kind of laugh at their expense when they get to the playoffs. But throughout the course of the regular season, they were always a very, very good running team in those early years when they had Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott both in their primes. And Dak, you can make the argument that he still kind of is in his prime, but Zeke kind of only had 1 or 2 years of prime years, and then he kind of fell off. So the Cowboys are looking to try and get back to those days where they were running the football very well. And I think Amarian Hampton, he's got the build. He's a bruiser of a running back, but he's also athletically gifted. He can get to the outside if he needs to. He's got speed, but he's also got that strength as well. He can run you over, or he can get around you. He's just one of those kinds of running backs. And on any other year, you'd probably think that he'd be the first running back taken off the board, if not for Ashton Jeanty. So the Cowboys would be getting a very, very good asset here if they were to get Amarian Hampton. So moving on, the number 3 running back I have is Travion Henderson, and I have him going to the Broncos. The Broncos are another team that needs running back right now, and Javonte Williams, as I previously mentioned, leaving for the Dallas Cowboys, that creates another hole for the Broncos. And the Broncos, of course, would love to trade up and get Ashton Jeanty, but that's going to cost way too much draft capital, as well as possibly some other, money or other maybe a player swap or something like that. It's going to cost a lot to be able to move up to that spot to take Ashton Jeanty. So I think for the Broncos, they go ahead and settle for Travion Henderson, which is weird even saying settle for him, because he was a 1,000-yard back at Ohio State who won the national championship last year. He was part of a running back duo that ended up getting over 2,000 yards rushing last year, because Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins both for him, because he was a 1,000-yard back at Ohio State who won the national championship last year. He was part of a running back duo that ended up getting over 2,000 yards rushing last year, Chicago Bears out of Iowa. Very bruising kind of running back as well, but I think that's a good fit for the Chicago Bears. Moving on, the last guy on this list I have is Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee, and I have him going to the Giants. And this is a pick in which the Giants would probably take in the second round, I would imagine, because the first round pick, I think they're going either Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter with that pick. So Dylan Sampson would be a good guy to get in the second round. He is a very, very good running back for Tennessee. Like I said, this is a very, very deep running back class, so you could get a lot of really talented guys even in later rounds, because there's not every team in the NFL is in desperate need of a running back. So you could, by process of elimination, still get a very good running back in the second or third rounds. So Dylan Sampson, he would be a first round pick if it wasn't for the year in which this class is. It's a very deep running back class, but in any other year, he'd probably be a first round pick, I would imagine. He still might go first round. Who knows? He might not go to the Giants. He might go somewhere else, but this is where I have him right now, because the Giants, I think, and maybe Giants fans don't necessarily agree with me, but I think that the Giants still are, of course, they're still reeling over the Saquon thing, of course, but I feel like this could be a situation in which they could kind of rebound from that. It's a very, very deep running back class, as I've mentioned. So what better way to kind of almost sort of make up for your mistake in letting Saquon go by getting a feature back in the draft, one that you can get possibly in on a day 2, day 3 sort of pick and still be a quality starter for you. So if you're going to try and find a way to replace Saquon, this would be the year to do it, in my opinion. So maybe they go running back in the second round, possibly. That's just kind of where I'm at with it. Dylan Sampson would be a good option right there. But there are tons of other good running backs in this draft. Guys I didn't even mention: Cam Scatterbo, DJ Giddens, Those kind of guys, they're all very, very good. Even Trevor Etienne coming out of Georgia, the brother of course, Travis Etienne, who plays for the Jacksonville Jaguars, but he's another running back that's also very good too. So there's a ton of running backs out there. I mentioned Judkins earlier, Quinshon Judkins. He's another option. It's just the list goes on and on seemingly when it comes to running backs. So those are the top 5 guys that I have in my mind, and that's where I think that they will go. Just review it one more time. Ashton Jeanty to the Raiders, Amarian Hampton to the Cowboys, Travion Henderson to the Broncos, Caleb Johnson to the Bears, and Dylan Sampson to the Giants. Another running back team, or running back needy team, that I did not mention here was the Pittsburgh Steelers. I do think they go running back at some point in this draft. I'm just not sure exactly where, to be quite honest, but I did want to just throw that in there too. Not just because I'm a Steelers fan, but, that's kind of most of the reason why I did that, but it's not all the reason why I did that. But there are a lot of good running backs out there, so, whoever gets these guys are going to have, quality players added to their roster no matter what. But those are the running backs. So when we come back, we're going to dive into another very deep draft class, and that is defensive tackle. And there are a lot of guys there that could be picked up in the later rounds that are still first-round type talents. So we'll get into all that. But stick with us. We're going to just take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk defensive tackles.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, guys, welcome back to the show here. We're going to get right on into our third segment of the show. We're going to talk about some defensive tackles, my top 5 defensive tackles that are available in this draft and where I think they might go. And, of course, as in previous segments that we mentioned, these are, not all necessarily going to be guys that are drafted in the first round, although all 5 of these guys absolutely could go in the first round because they are that talented. But this is just where I think that they will eventually go at some point, whether it's first round, second round, third round, whatever the case. But to be fair, I don't think there's any third round guys on this list. Not even guys that are going to fall that far anyway. So let's get right into the list. Number 1 is, of course, the top defensive tackle in this class, and that is Mason Graham, and that's coming out of Michigan. And I have talked about him in previous shows before about him being the top defensive tackle in the draft class. I have him going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars are also one of those teams that were in the conversations of possibly wanting Ashton Jeanty, and they happened to pick right before the Las Vegas Raiders at number 5. So they could be a player in the Ashton Jeanty game. So I definitely want to just throw that out there. But the Jags, Las Vegas Raiders at number 5. So they could be a player in the Ashton Jeanty game. So I definitely want to just throw that out. They have 2 decent running backs. Were there big need? Want to shore up that defense, get back to the Saxonville era that they had a few years ago when they had a loaded defense, very good secondary players, very good pass rushers, and just an overall great defense that those particular years. So they want to get back into that realm, I guess, is, for lack of a better term. But they got a whole new head coach, a whole new system that they're going to be implementing. Of course, with Liam Cohen coming over from Tampa Bay, being the offensive coordinator there. He's now the head coach in Jacksonville after kind of a weird situation that kind of ended up with him being hired there. We've talked about that, so I won't get into that. But Mason Graham to the Jags, I think, is a good pick, a good fit for the Jags tackle in this draft class coming out of Michigan. There's a lot of guys on that Michigan defense that should be coming out in the first round, in my opinion. One of those particular guys are actually on this list here, outside of Mason Graham anyway. But Mason Graham to the Jags, I think, makes a lot of sense for them, and it would definitely fill a need for them. So I have Mason Graham going to the Jags. Number 2, I have Derek Harmon coming out of Oregon, and I have him going to the Steelers. This is the pick that I think the Steelers will make. Derek Harmon, I think, would be a very solid pickup for the Steelers along that defensive line. They lost a couple of guys along the defensive line. They lost Larry Ogunjobi, who honestly, even in the time that he was there, didn't play a ton because he had a lot of injuries in the couple of years that he was there. He also had a lot of injuries when he was in Cincinnati as well, and as well as Cleveland. He kind of bounced around the AFC North before ultimately landing with the Steelers. He's had injury issues throughout his career, and although he is a solid defensive tackle, they couldn't really rely on that, and he is now somewhere else. So I like Derek Harmon there for the Steelers because that kind of brings back a little bit of what their defensive line kind of would be like when they had Stephon Tuitt lining alongside Cam Hayward there. So Cam Hayward, of course, is getting up there in age. He's still an all-pro. He's still giving you very, very good production out of that position, but they need to find a way to get younger at that position. Now, they did draft Keanu Benton last year along that defensive line, and he's kind of come along, but he's still not quite there yet. It's kind of a work in progress. He has all the physical gifts that you would need to be that kind of player, but they still need to get younger at that position. And, you can't rely on hoping that this guy will finally turn into another Cam Hayward. So you got to go and get younger at that position. And Derek Harmon, I think, would be a nice pairing alongside Cam Hayward. And who better to learn from than a future Hall of Famer like Cam Hayward is. So that's where I have him going. So number 3, I have Walter Nolan, and I have him going to the 49ers. And 49ers, they need some help along that defensive line. They lost a lot of guys in free defense, not just the defensive line, but they lost Javon Hargrave along the defensive line. They lost some guys in the secondary as well, and some guys on offense as well. So they've got a lot of holes that they need to fill, but I still think the 49ers are a pretty solid team overall anyway. But I think Walter Nolan would fit in that defense pretty well. You pair him with a guy like Joey Bosa, and then, of course, Fred Warner on the linebacker position. That could make for very formidable defense once again, like they have typically been under this whole era where they've been going to NFC championship games or Super Bowls, although still not actually ever coming out on top of those Super Bowl games, but they have been right in the mix. Usually it's either they are in the mix or they're injured all to hell and then they miss the playoffs. That's kind of the whole balance of the 49ers in recent years. That's just kind of where they've been. Either they're hurt or they're injured. So, we'll see what the 49ers decide to do, but I like Walter Nolan there out of Ole Miss, coming for the 49ers. So moving on, I have Kenneth Grant. That was the other guy I was talking about from Michigan, another guy along that defensive line that is a first-round talent and is a very, very good player. And I have him going to the Chiefs. And the Chiefs pick, of course, number 31 overall. They're looking to try and get some depth alongside Chris Jones on that defense. The defense was very, very good last year overall. So adding a guy like Kenneth Grant to that lineup will make them that much more formidable. The Chiefs do need some help in other areas, of course, but when you're picking at kind of this spot in the draft like they are, number 31, you kind of start to think about maybe going best player available and not necessarily need. Although that is a factor that you have to, think about when making the kind of decision like this. But best player available in the Chiefs' mind at that point would probably be Kenneth Grant, because that also addresses a need, and he would probably be the best player available at that time. So I like Kenneth Grant from Michigan going to the Chiefs. The final pick that I have on this segment, I have the Eagles selecting defensive tackle Tyleik Williams, And the Eagles are no stranger to picking up defensive tackles, defensive linemen in general. Take a look at just even last year. I mean, they commit so much draft capital to their defense, and it's no wonder because their defense is very, very good. Take a look at last year what they did. They went and they got 2 rookie corners, and both of those guys ended up getting significant playing time and made that secondary even better than they already were. Now, there are some holes in that secondary that they could address at some point in this draft, and I'm assuming they will, because C.J. Gardner-Johnson is no longer there now. Darius Slay is also a veteran corner that is gone now, so they're going to try and upgrade their defense in other routes, but really the biggest loss, in my opinion, for that defense was Milton Williams along that defensive line going to New England. So that opens up a huge hole for the Eagles on that defensive line, and getting a young guy like Tyleik Williams would be a big step in the right direction. I mean, there's other guys that you could possibly consider here as well. Maybe some edge rushers possibly. But defensive tackle-wise, I like Tyleik Williams there to go to the Eagles. And the Eagles, like I said, they have been known in recent years to build through the trenches. Their offensive line is one of the best in the league, arguably the best in the league. And their defense always starts along the defensive line. And that Super Bowl against the Kansas City Chiefs, they didn't blitz really at all. They sent 4 every single time, and they just absolutely harassed Patrick Mahomes because they are that talented up front, and they know how to develop their young guys. I mean, they've got a very, very good defensive coordinator in Vic Fangio. So there's tons of talent along that entire coaching staff as well as the entire defense as a whole. I don't think the Eagles are like the guys that they lost because they have that much depth on that how to develop their young guys. I mean, they've made that whole as it is. So right now, that's where I have the Eagles going. So moving on, when we come back, that's actually it for that segment. But when we come back, we're going to talk some college football, and we're going to do a little bit of outlooks here, and we're going to talk about the Nebraska Cornhuskers first, and then we're going to talk about a very interesting team from last year, and that is the SMU Mustangs, the recently transitioned to ACC, and they ended up having a tremendous year, got to the college football playoff and all that. So we're going to talk about them as well. So I'm looking forward to talking about them in the next or in the final segment. But when we come back, we're going to talk some Cornhusker football. So stick with us, and we'll be right back right after this.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC. To access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, guys, welcome back to the show. We're going to get right into this next segment here, and we're going to be talking about some college football. We've got the Nebraska Cornhuskers, their outlook here for this coming season, taking a quick look back at what they did last year, finished 7-6 overall last year, 3-6 in Big Ten play, and 5-2 at home, but they struggled on the road. They were 1-4 on the road, Big Ten play, and 5-2 at home, was a big factor in the record that they ended up having. Head coach Matt Rule brought in some offense in the middle of last year. He brought in now assistant coach Dana Holgerson to kind of run the offense a little bit. So he is going into his first full off season as the assistant coach / offensive coordinator for Nebraska. Taking a look at their offense as a whole, of course, their projected starter is not really much of a surprise. It's Dylan Raiola, the starter from last year. Last year, he went on to set records at Nebraska for a freshman, including passing yards for a freshman at 2,819 yards and freshman completion percentage at 67.1%. So he was solid, not quite where you want him to be, but he was a freshman at the same time, so you can't really fault him too much for some of his, drawbacks. But hopefully he improves this coming season. But he led the country last year in completion percentage among freshmen and was third in passing yards by a freshman in all of college football. So so that's kind of where Nebraska were last year at the quarterback position. Just real quick, just to respond to the comment here from Eric Ashton Genty to New England. I could totally see that happening. I have talked about the Raiders, obviously. Picking him up, it seems like the most likely thing to happen. But I know earlier in the whole process here, the Patriots were possibly hoping that they could land a guy like Travis Hunter. Don't think that that's a possibility now. And of course, they went ahead and they got Stephon Diggs at the wide receiver position. I still think that they might go wide receiver, though, instead of Ashton Genty. But who knows? I mean, if Ashton Genty is available and there's no reason to think that he won't be at number 4, then New England could absolutely grab him. Because you take a look at a guy like Mike Vrabel, who ran a very, run-heavy offense when he was in Tennessee with Derrick Henry and all that. It could be a good fit. So I would agree with the Patriots taking Genty if they were able to do so. So that's an interesting kind of conversation to have as well. But getting back into Nebraska here, their projected backup, as we were talking about their quarterbacks, Dylan Raiola, of course, is going to be the starter. The backup is slated as Jalen Gramstad right now. So that's kind of where they stand at quarterback. At the running back position, the projected starter is Emmett Johnson. Last season, he had 908 all-purpose yards, included 598 rushing yards and 286 receiving yards. His 39 catches that he had last year were the most by a Nebraska running back since 2007, and that was back when Marlon Lucky had 75 for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. But he started 5 games, but ended up playing in all 13, so he wasn't the consistent starter. But it was really after Dana Holgorsen was brought in throughout the course of the year that he really started to kind of take a jump and really started to set his foot as being that premier back for Nebraska. So Johnson, by far the most complete back on Nebraska's roster, and he, I'm sure, probably knows it. But Mekhi Nelson, Quentin Ives are both guys that are possibly going to be backups as well. So just a quick thing here. I don't want to ignore the comments or anything, but Eric just responding. Stevenson, he is a little injury prone, so having a guy like Ashton Genty, who hasn't really had any injury issues at least at Boise State anyway, that would be a pretty solid pickup. He's pretty durable for the most part. Got a lot of workload too in college football, and he was still able to kind of power through it and be very effective. But Vrabel used to having Derrick Henry in Tennessee, of course, and he definitely did. He tailor-made his offensive strategy around that, so he could absolutely do that with Genty, and that's kind of what I was, mentioning beforehand. I think it really does fit if they were able to get it. Wouldn't surprise me if they drafted Ashton Genty. It's just the whole conversation this whole offseason has been the Raiders going ahead and getting Ashton Genty overall. But Dallas, I don't think Dallas trades up to get Genty. I just don't trust Jerry Jones. I feel like he's just going to just stand pat and just take whoever's there. But that's just my opinion. But moving back into Nebraska here, with the projected backups for the running back position, Mekhi Nelson, Quentin Ives, most likely going to be your backups there. Nelson came in as a he could possibly end up being the steal of the recruiting classes if he ends up being as good as they think that he's going to be. So we'll have to see. But on the other hand, you have Quentin Ives there too. He's a name that you have to definitely keep an eye on. We've been hearing about him when it comes to Nebraska anyway. So he's kind of the next up-and-comer. He was a recruit in the 2023 class, and he was a 3-star recruit. So there are 2 different types of running backs, though. But Mekhi Nelson is much smaller, at 6 foot even, 185 pounds. So he's, more shifty of a running back. But Quentin Ives is more of the bruiser, 6'3", 210 pounds, big-bodied running back. So there's options there. So it'll be interesting to see what they decide to do at the running back. At 6 foot even, 185 pounds. So he's, more shifty of a running back, but 200. So there's options to do some guys like Dane Key, Ja'Cory Barney Jr., and Janiran Bonner, all three of those guys potentially being contributors for that offense. Dane Key is probably going to be your main number one receiver. He is the senior on this group, and he followed his wide receiver coach, the new wide receiver coach, Dakeil Shorts, who came over from Kentucky. He followed him over here. So I would consider Dane Key most likely going to be the for sure starters, along with Ja'Cory Barney for this Nebraska offense. And while at Kentucky, Dane Key caught 126 passes for 1,800 yards and 14 touchdowns in the 3 seasons that he was there. So there's potential there. He has some experience as well. Ja'Cory Barney is a true freshman, played in all 13 games last season for Nebraska, caught 55 passes, 447 yards. So, so there's at least 1 or 2 starting spots that could be had for the wide receiver position when you get past Dane Key and Ja'Cory Barney Jr. So we'll have to see if they end up, getting into those spots in that 3 and 4 spot, as far as Janiran Bonner and Nizia Hunter as well is another name to watch. He transferred over from Cal this offseason. So there's definitely possibilities there. Hunter, he's 6'2", 210 pounds, same type of frame as Dane Key, but Hunter started 8 games last year, played in 12 last season as a redshirt freshman. 40 passes he caught for 578 yards and 5 touchdowns. Cortez Mills, a true freshman, he is another name to watch too. He appears to have the highest ceiling of any of the wide receivers that are on that roster. And a lot of people think that he could possibly push for some significant playing time relatively soon into the season. Mills was a high school All-American and was ranked number 13 and the wide receiver position in the country and ESPN, and he was ranked number 14 by Rivals as well. So when we switch over to the defense, we want to talk about the defense here a little bit before we move on here. But it's a new era in the Nebraska Cornhuskers defensive room. John Butler taking over as defensive coordinator. He replaces Tony White, who went to FSU right before the Pinstripe Bowl last season, so he's going to be the defensive coordinator there. But Butler was the secondary coach and pass game coordinator in 2024. So they've got a little bit of familiarity right there, but his only defensive coordinator position that he has had since being a coach in college football was when he was at Penn State in 2013, and he did pretty well as his defense was second in scoring across that season. So the 2024 Nebraska defense was one of the best they've had in recent years. They ranked top 20 nationally in rushing defense, total defense, and scoring defense. But they will need to get some significant contributions from some of the newer guys and some of their returning guys, because they do have to replace a lot of production off that along that defense. Several key players who have moved on, particularly Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmacher. Both of those guys are, of course, gone, and they were key contributors last year. So they're going to need to find a way to replace those guys. Robinson, he was a third-team All-Big Ten selection, 37 tackles last year, 12.5 tackles for loss, and also added on 7 sacks. So production, for sure, that you're going to need to replace. As far as Hutmacher is concerned, he's a 2-time honorable mention All-Big Ten selection, started all 13 games last year, 24 tackles, 4 tackles for a loss. He had 2 sacks, and he had 1 forced fumble. He's a big-bodied guy, though, 6'4", 310-pound defensive lineman, disruptive force throughout the entire season last year, particularly in a game against Northwestern where he set career highs with 7 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, and he had 2.5 sacks as well. So, that's definitely a guy that's going to be hard to replace, but he is, moving on to other, pastures. So, the Nebraska Cornhuskers is going to have to try and find a way to match that production in some other way. But despite those departures, there are still several promising players to keep an eye on. Elijah Judy, a 6'3", 285-pound defensive lineman from Philly. He announced he's going to return for his last season here in 2025. He transferred from Texas A&M. Judy spent 2 seasons with Nebraska and finished 2024 with 11 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, and a quarterback hurry while he played behind both Robinson and Hutmacher. So another guy to look out for is Riley Van Poppel. He is a young player that's expected to get some pretty significant playing time, and hopefully he'll be able to step up for that defense. Former 4-star recruit. He quickly cracked Nebraska's defensive rotation as a true freshman, and he appeared in 11 games as a rotational player last year. So definitely a guy to keep an eye on. Another potential dude on that defensive line is Keona Davis. Davis played in 12 games last season. He had 10 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss. Nebraska's been pretty active in addressing these defensive needs overall, both through the transfer portal and through recruiting. So Davis is another guy on that defensive line that could be a key contributor to that. So, but as far as transfers and recruiting, the most significant addition that they have gotten on that defensive line that could be a key contributor is gotten James Winery, a 6'7", 255-pound 5-star defensive end, transferred over from Missouri. They also added Marcus Watson-Trent, a linebacker from Georgia Southern, who won Sun Belt Defensive Player of the Year honors last year with 359 tackles over 3 seasons. So he has been very productive, of course, at a smaller school, so lesser competition. So there is kind of that thing that you need to kind of think about. But for the most part, that should be a quality player that they add to that defense. But in the secondary, Nebraska's got Idaho defensive back who transferred, Andrew Marshall, first-team All-Big Sky cornerback in 2024, and he recorded 50 tackles, 3 passes defense, 1 tackle for a loss, and 1 forced fumble as a sophomore there in Idaho. So the Cornhuskers also added Jameer Khan, 6 foot, 180-pound defensive back from Southern Illinois. He spent 2 seasons with Southern Illinois, totaling 68 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, and 9 pass breakups, with the 1 forced fumble and 1 fumble recovery. So there's a lot of promising players on that defense for Nebraska. So it should result in a pretty interesting year. Last year, of course, going 7-6. I could see them getting up to about maybe possibly 8 or 9 wins this year. Could be in the conversation for a college football playoff appearance, but I don't think they do actually get in. I think they come up just short. 9 wins is still a pretty solid response to a 7-win season, as they're still trying to build up that team. And Dylan Raiola is still trying to come into his own as a quarterback as well. So a lot of promise there for Nebraska, but they're trying to get back to the days that they were when they were in the 90s, when they were winning national championships, or at least competing for them, and their big rivalry that they had with Florida for a couple of years there. But they were very good back then. I remember watching those games. It was always Nebraska and Florida, really, it seemed like. But yeah, so they're still trying to get back to that. They haven't reached even close to as good as they were back then since then. So they're still trying to get back to that, and maybe this is a step in the right direction for them doing it. But they're still not college football playoff material in my mind, but they can be if they continue to go in the right direction here. So when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about some more college football, but we're going to talk a little bit about SMU, one of the more intriguing teams from last year, and they kind of came out of nowhere in the ACC to kind of stun a lot of people and had a tremendous year. So we're going to talk about them when we come back here. So stick with us, and we'll be right back right after this break. All right, guys, welcome back to the final segment of this show. It is Draft Eve. So next time you see me after this segment, we're going to be talking NFL draft stuff while the draft is going on. So again, just reminding you guys that if you want to contribute and just join in on the conversation tomorrow, you definitely could do that. 7:30 Eastern Standard Time is when we'll be having the live show, and it's going to run the entire draft, the entire first round of the draft. So definitely keep an eye out for that. It's going to be a long show, but it's going to be a fun one. So I'm looking forward to that. But let's get into SMU because they have some very intriguing things about them this coming season. Last year, just take a quick, time in the time machine here and just go back here to the 2024 season. Head coach Rhett Lashley enters his fourth season this year with SMU, growing some pretty good national recognition from what he was able to do on offense for that team last year. Last year, speaking of the offense, very balanced attack that they had, 261.9 passing yards per game, 167.6 rushing yards per game, and they were very adaptable. Rhett Lashley was very adaptable with his personnel. Last year, of course, they transitioned from the American Athletic Conference, the AAC, to the Atlantic Coast Conference, better known as the ACC. They made their first appearance in a Power 4 conference. They had a pretty strong record overall last year, 11-3, 8-0 in the conference and in the ACC, and they also got to the college football playoff. And it was a historic year, and they just missed out on the ACC title by losing a narrow game to Clemson. So they were right up there. They were very talented last year, kind of came out of nowhere. But the offense, particularly last year with Preston Stone as the quarterback, was a major strength. 28 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. He was fantastic. Defensive improvements. They've made some improvements on that regard, and we're going to get into more specifics of that a little bit later on in this segment. But, significant improvement on the defensive side of the ball. They were ranked among the top 20 in both offense and defense. So, So, Eric, there's not really much you can do if it doesn't appeal to you. But, if you want to join the show tomorrow, if the NFL is more appealing to you, we're going to be talking NFL draft, and that's always exciting. So you can definitely join and add some comments on that show as well, because it's going to be fun. So, but I get it. Not everybody is into college football. Sometimes on some years I'm kind of off of it too. Just depending on, how things go. I was way more into it back when the Gators were winning national titles because, of course, I'm a Gators fan. But I still, of course, always follow college football, just maybe not as in-depth as I once did. But still, with having this show, it's kind of renewed my interest in college football a lot more. And I'm really looking forward to this coming season, actually, for a number of reasons. Of course, I want to see what potential quarterbacks could be available for my NFL team, my Steelers, next year, assuming that they do that, of course. But so let's I'm sorry, just got kind of sidetracked there. Let's go ahead and get back into SMU. Last year, taking a look at what they did. They had a very, very good quarterback, like we said. Now this year, their attack revolves around quarterback Kevin Jennings, who had a pretty impressive statistical season last year in the conference, had 3,245 passing yards, 23 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, command of an offense that averaged just about 430 yards per game. He has a dual threat ability as well, kept defensive coordinators up at night a lot, I'm sure, because of how he was able to kind of make plays that were off schedule and things like that. So, but what makes SMU's quarterback situation even more enviable, I guess is the right word to say, is the addition of the transfer from Wisconsin, Tyler Van Dyke. He's got elite level insurance in case Jennings misses any kind of time. In the 2024 season, when he was a redshirt senior at Wisconsin, didn't play much. He was only in about 3 or 4 games before he had a season-ending injury, but in the time that he did play under Coach Fickle there at Wisconsin, he threw for 422 yards and a touchdown, was 43 of 68 in terms of his completion percentage, and then he had the season-ending injury, of course, after 5 passes in a game earlier this year. So Yeah, but the 2023, if you want some more further detail into what he did in 2023 season when he was at Miami, he saw 11 games of action and he started 10 games. Threw for a team high 2,700 yards and 19 touchdowns compared to 12 interceptions, and that was back in 2023, so obviously not the Cam Ward years or anything like that. But the transfer portal has been basically where SMU has made all of their noise so far. Yeah, but just to kind of continue on here in the comments, Eric comments again, thinks the Giants will pass on Shedeur, trade back, and draft Arch Manning next year because of Eli. That's kind of an interesting thought. And you say Brian Daboll is not getting fired. I don't think he's getting fired this year or anything like that, but if they have another bad year like they've had in recent years, I think it's very, very possible that he could be fired. I don't agree with it because I think Brian Daboll is a very good head coach, but I don't see him keeping his job if the Giants have another year like they had last year. And I think kind of the whole Saquon thing kind of inflated how bad that year was, kind of made it look way worse. But really that team didn't have a ton of talent on either side of the ball, really. I mean, they had Dexter Lawrence on defense. Of course, he's a great player. But, outside of him, I mean, they've struggled to stop the run despite the fact that they had a very good player like that. So, yeah, and I also agree with you. I think the Giants will pass on Shedeur. I don't think Shedeur makes it out of the top 10, though, just because I think the Saints will take him. I'm not saying that I think Shedeur is top 10 draft worthy. It's just I think that that's where he's going to end up going. The Arch Manning thing, it's going to kind of depend on what he does this year, his first year as a starter at Texas. If he comes in and, just doesn't play very well, then you could be looking at him falling drastically. Just look at some of the guys in the classes this year. There's so many different guys that have been saying, oh, yeah, this guy's going to go in the first round, but no, he's actually going to fall into the third round. Jackson Dart and Shedeur Sanders are perfect examples of that. Earlier in this whole process, a lot of people thought Shedeur Sanders was not going to get out of the top 5. Now people are talking about him falling all the way to 21 to the Steelers. So, you just never really know what's going to happen. But, that's what's so exciting about the NFL draft and everything. It's, it may seem kind of boring to just sit there and watch and wait for your team to pick, but when you're actually analyzing everything and talking about the different picks and things like that, it ends up being very entertaining. So, I'm looking forward to it. But, another question here by Eric, but we got to keep to the SMU here. But we'll answer your question here though. But Myles Garrett, did he sign back with Cleveland because they promised to be a contender this year, drafting Sanders? Well, to be fair, drafting Sanders would not make them a contender. But I get what you're saying. But no, I don't think it's because they were saying they're going to draft Sanders that Myles Garrett re-signed. I honestly think the whole Myles Garrett thing was just for him to get a massive contract, which is what he got. He said he wants to win, yet he wants to play for Cleveland. It doesn't make sense. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm sorry if you're a Browns fan, if anyone out there is a Browns fan, but you don't sign with Cleveland if you're wanting to win championships. You just don't. And so I think Myles Garrett was more about money, despite the fact that he said it wasn't about money. But he's been known to kind of fabricate things in the past. So not really surprising that he did what he did. But Cleveland's not going to be a contender. They're going to finish bottom of the AFC North, I'm sure of it. So, but that's just my own personal opinion. So, I mean, I'm sure a lot of people could probably disagree with that, but that's just my opinion on that. But again, I just want to close out this SMU segment here, just to dive into it real quick because we just got a few more minutes here. Diving into their defense, a couple of guys that have been added to patch some roster holes at the safety position. You have Rocket Rahimi, the former San Jose State standout. He adds some physicality to the secondary. Terry Webb, the defensive lineman, fills the gap left by Elijah Roberts with some very good pass rush potential pretty much immediately. And the portal additions don't just fill the gaps, they could potentially even upgrade those positions of strength. So SMU's success last season, it wasn't just luck, in my opinion. It wasn't just, because they had a soft schedule or anything like that. If you take a look at their numbers, they are legitimate. They were 8-0 in regular season ACC play. So perfect. You can't really get better than that. They had about 430 yards per game of total offense, held opponents to under 320 yards per game usually, reached the college football playoffs, of course, and lost just a nail-biter to Clemson in the ACC championship game. But there are some areas that they still need to improve upon. And, of course, defensive consistency against elite competition is definitely something that they need to improve on. Their defense, they showed flashes of brilliance last year, but typically it's whenever they played against those really, really big-name teams like Clemson and Penn State, they really kind of struggled at times defensively. So when they get to the bigger competition, which is, where they're going to be pretty much, going forward, at least for this year, considering what they did last year, there's going to be expectations there. So they're going to have to come across some pretty tough teams in order to get to where they want to get to. But the addition of Terry Webb and a revamped defensive line, I think, will generate more consistent pressure, and they won't have to do that as much with blitzing. That's the best thing. If you can get pressure by just rushing your front three or front four, then that's the best kind of defense that you can have. The best defenses, not just in college football, but in the NFL, have tremendous defensive fronts. That's where it all starts. I mean, that's, you could call it cliche, call it whatever you want, but that is true. It starts in the trenches on both sides of the ball for your teams to be successful, whether that's offense or defense. So if they can get consistent pressure along that defensive line, I think the defensive improvements will show. Their in-game adjustments against top-tier opponents also needs to be improved upon. The coaching staff struggled to kind of counterpunch effectively whenever you had the initial game plan that kind of encountered some resistance based on what the other opponent was doing. In those big games, they need to be better about that, and I think that they will in year two. The conference should bring better situational awareness and that flexibility that they have with their tactics as well. Like I said, they have to replace a lot of offensive production. There's a few guys here and there that they need to replace, but for the most part, they return a lot of talent from last year. They have a couple of critical matchups that's going to probably define them this year. Of course, the ultimate measuring stick that they have against Clemson, that is at Death Valley at Clemson, so that's going to be a very tough game. Very entertaining game, too, probably. But very tough game, and that'll be the measuring stick as to where they're at when they play them. And, of course, they play Miami in a home showdown. That could determine the ACC championship positioning as well, because that's a little bit later on in the season. They also play Louisville, which is another home test against a program that's kind of on a similar trajectory. Now, they have a new quarterback now because of Tyler Shuck going into the NFL draft, so we'll have to see what they're fielding, and maybe I'll do a little bit of a preview for Louisville here in the next coming days or so. But another matchup they have is against Baylor, at Baylor, non-conference opponent, of course, and that's an opportunity to make a statement against the Power 4 opponent. So all of those things are factors in this season here for SMU. But overall, I think SMU has the ability to get to that same spot and maybe even win the ACC this year, as they were just, a few plays here and there short of doing it last year when they lost to Clemson. So, and I appreciate, Eric, for all of your comments, all of your input and insight. It definitely helps drive the show, so I appreciate the kind words as well. But we're going to go ahead and close up shop here because we're going to get ready for our NFL draft tomorrow, our draft show. Definitely tune in for that. It's going to be fun. Myself and Jeremy Lapidus, as I said, definitely check out some of his stuff too. He's very knowledgeable. He's great at what he does. So definitely check him out if you haven't checked any of his stuff out. But he'll be joining me, and we'll be doing our live show together with the NFL draft. Looking forward to that. So definitely check that out. But once again, I want to thank you guys for tuning into the show. And as of course, we are always brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network, and your support does mean a lot to us. So please remember to subscribe to the show and leave a positive review. It does make a difference, and we also invite you to follow us on Facebook, X, TikTok, and Instagram for more of that content and updates that you love. Thank you guys once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful night, and we will see you tomorrow on draft night. So looking forward to that. All right, guys, we'll talk to you later.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to